Well, if Pharaoh was 40 years old, then he would have been born when Moses left. But nevertheless, I think the chances are that at least somebody knew who Moses was. If it wasn't Pharaoh, probably there were advisors who were present who knew who Moses was. And the fact that he was returning here and now with this message was significant. Now, this leads us now into the stories of the plagues. And what are your thoughts about this business of the plagues? I mean, is this the way you would expect God to introduce himself? What was God trying to accomplish here?
Get their attention.
Get their attention, okay.
Demonstrate his supremacy.
Demonstrate his supremacy, okay.
These guys had pagan beliefs. I mean, Egyptians had pagan beliefs, and they're worshiping all these other gods, and they think they're deities, and God is letting them know that there's only one.
Yes, right. So this really comes down to not necessarily a contest between Moses and Pharaoh, but rather God and Pharaoh, who represents all of the pagan deities that are, yeah, exactly. Now, each of those deities represents what? Or whom? Satan. Exactly, Satan. Those are represented, and again, I don't know if there's 1,500 different types of devils out there or what, but obviously Satan was busy at work creating a counterfeit for the sake of distracting people from God as opposed to engaging with him. Yes, Geraldine.
I think it's important to also remember that God is in the business of saving people.
Yep.
So in all of the plagues, his, I would say, ultimate goal was to bring people to an understanding of who he is. And I think that this was a wake-up call for many Egyptians, and we see that there was quite a large mixed multitude that left with the Israelites. There were people who came to know God through this experience.
Okay.
Difficult as it was.
Right.
But also understand that the Israelites, the Jews, they did not, most of them, a great many of them, didn't even remember God. So that's why ye are idle, with the Sabbath when Moses comes in, and they believe that he did the serpent, he did the miracles that God told him to prove to the Israelites who he was to start with. They needed to understand as much, and maybe sometimes in some respects almost more than the Egyptians, that this is your God and he's come to rescue you.
Yeah, I think we need to be, so we're really not told very much about what the state of the Israelites were spiritually at this point in time. We do know that there were God-believing Israelites. Moses, his family. I mean, these were godly people.
Patriarchs
And
tells you, though, that they had forgotten God, that they were bowing down to other gods.
Sure.
By this time, and as far as that is concerned.
And God also tells us in Patriarchs and Prophets that there were those true, as always has been in the church. There are those who are on fire for God and are praying and wanting salvation, and there are those who are sifting out.
sure.
And so she's very clear that, yes, the only reason they were working on Sabbath was because they had rejected God. And the road to hell is broad and narrow.
So Could we maybe say, I mean, we don't know that they had necessarily rejected God, but they had maybe forgotten God.
Well, there must have been some still very faithful because
Yes.
God
Ex-
heard their cry.
Exactly. And so, again, I think we have to be careful about putting them all in one basket or all in this basket. But the bottom line is that there were those who were, there were those who weren't. And God was wanting,
As a nation, corporate, they had backslid. But there were individuals who had not, of course.
There were always the princes, of Judah, of Reuben, and so on. They were always the hierarchy, and like she's saying, they were the ones who were praying out to God. That God says, I heard their cries. Well, here's their cries that are crying out. Okay, 400 years, we know, Jochebed knew. That's why she was like protecting Moses, felt that he was the Redeemer, and taught him so.
so I'm not sure that Jochebed had any insight as to who Moses was.
I'm back to patriarchs and prophets.
Yeah, I believe so.
Because you don't even, as far as Exodus is concerned, you don't hear the name Jochebed to start with. You just hear the Miriam, you hear the mother of, and what she was doing, and so on and so forth. You find out her name and the father's name later. So yes, being the fourth generation that I am, I get this from what Ellen White said, and why she raised him singularly, even almost above, that's my terminology, above Aaron and Miriam, because she knew that he was where he was going and what the potential was.
The patriarchs and prophets, God also revealed to Ellen White that the princes of Israel were instructed that Moses was the person who was going to redeem the nation, take them out of slavery.
At which point in time?
I'm not sure, I can't say that at this instant. And he had, and she also states that angels had revealed to Moses that this was his job. And I think it was before he...
Before what?
Before Moses blew it.
Okay.
Slew the
So during the first 40 years.
Right. And so I fully expect that Moses figured he had blown it, that, he was no longer, this was not going to be his job. But when God came to him when he was 80 years old in the burning bush, it was like, okay, Moses, I said that you were going to be doing this, and yes, in fact, now's the time.
Okay, well, let's look though here. In Exodus 12, verse 12, it says, God says, I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. What does the word judgment mean to you, and what do you think God is trying to communicate here when he makes that statement? I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. No.
He's letting him know that if he's going to bring judgment to all the gods, I'm assuming that he's saying that I am the one and only God, and therefore, this is my, he's the only God. And that's what he's going to demonstrate. He's the only God.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Geraldine?
Another thought is that God, I lost my train of thought. What was the question? What did he mean with what?
Well, God says, I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. What is God saying here when he says that?
I think to a large degree, he was saying, I'm going to reveal the truth. And judgment, that's the whole point of the court, is to God was going to bring judgment. He was going to reveal the truth about himself and them.
Okay. Yes, I like what you've said. We oftentimes think of judgment as somebody, sitting up in a judge's chair making proclamations. You're guilty, you're going to go here, we're going to punish you there, whatever else. In reality, what a judge does is a judge brings out the evidence as to what has happened. And based on the evidence, then makes a proclamation. So what needed to be judged in relationship to this time, this event? When God says, I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt, what is he saying?
He's going to show that they're liars.
I'm going to demonstrate that they're false and that I am true. I am going to reveal what's happening behind the curtain, so to speak. Now, the other issue that is interesting in this story, is what is on page 32 of the Lesson Quarterly, and that is the issue of Pharaoh's heart. What is it that happens during these events that is significant in relationship to Pharaoh's heart? And before I get there, let me ask you this question. What do we mean when we use the word heart? Pharaoh's heart. Are we talking about thump, 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 thump? We're talking about what goes on in our head. Okay. Now, where decisions are made. That's exactly right. And what does it say happens to Pharaoh's heart? It hardens. What does that mean?
Simply means he has one direction he's going. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. He doesn't care if it's right or wrong. He's just going to do that, and you can't talk to him otherwise.
So we say that person's mind is set or made up. Okay.
Now, how would that apply to our living today?
How would that apply to our... let's get to that question in just a moment. I think that's a good question. Okay. So, let's see. Where was I going to go here now? Mind made up. The question I was going to ask here is, have any of us hardened our hearts? Been stubborn, so to speak? Been set on a course that you were not going to change, regardless of the evidence? I mean, we've all made that mistake where we've, had to hit the brick wall, so to speak, before we realize that we're going the wrong direction. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things here in this story is Pharaoh's heart is hardened as a result of two things, or as a result of the action of two individuals. Who are those two individuals? God is one, and who is the other one?
Satan?
Oh, okay. I'll give you half a point there. I'm going to say Pharaoh. Okay? In other words, what I'm trying to get you to think about here is it speaks of Pharaoh hardening his heart, and it also speaks of God hardening Pharaoh's heart. Now, most of us can understand and relate to the first. Pharaoh hardening his heart. Stubbornly digging our heels in and saying, I don't care what the evidence is, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, that's we've all done that. We've all had to learn that lesson, go down that road. Okay? But are you uncomfortable with the thought of God hardening Pharaoh's heart? And what does that mean? How does that work? Is that fair? Yes, Kimber.
Well, to me, I think God already knew Pharaoh's heart. I don't think he hardened it. I think he strengthened it to stay firm of what he actually really felt in his heart.
Okay. She was saying that that she didn't think God necessarily hardened his heart, but strengthened it in the way that it was already set to go. Is that okay?
What happens to your heart when the Holy Spirit leaves?
What happens when the Holy Spirit leaves? Okay? Let's start with the first part. When we say that Pharaoh hardened his heart, what does that mean? That means that Pharaoh was convinced in his mind that what he believed, what he understood in relationship to the cosmos, the gods, and all that sort of thing, that in his mind, he was what?
God.
He was right. He understood this correctly, and he was not going to change his mind. Okay?
He was more proud than he was, I'm not going to change my mind. He became more and more stubborn, as even his people are saying, we're destroyed, let them go. He's hardened his heart all the more, because he felt who he was as well, I'm God, and pride was, he was full of it, let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I don't know if it was pride or what, but he certainly was set in his position. Okay.
Will, what was your question?
So my question is trying to help us differentiate what is going on here when we speak of Pharaoh hardening his heart and God hardening Pharaoh's heart.
Then you proposed something, that his hardening his own heart meant what?
He had made up his own mind. He had made up his mind based on what he understood reality to be, and felt that he was in the right.
That I'm not so sure.
Oh, okay.
Because I think, honey, that the hardening of his heart means that he was actually convicted. He was convicted, but he chose otherwise. And that's a problem that we can have too. And so he actually consciously, or maybe subconsciously some of the time, but he was convicted and he said no. No.
Okay.
That's me hardening.
So
If I don't know right or wrong, then it seems like I'm not hardening my heart. I just haven't understood it yet. But anyway, I could be wrong.
if you don't know right or wrong,
Yeah.
The lesson says that biblically, text states that it was God who hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Right, it does. It also says that, but there's, how do you interpret that?
Ethan.
I was basically, actually, she kind of stole some things I was going to say. But,
Oh, it must be right then.
yeah, right. My experience in my own life and in working with other people is whether or not you believe in your heart you are right or you know God's right and you're just going to go contrary. What matters is what you decide to do. And hardening your heart tends to be a decision that I'm going to go contrary to God. I think that's evident in Romans chapter 1, where it says, For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in things that have been made, so they are without excuse.
Okay, so I don't disagree with that. Yes, on the back, Tom.
Okay, the hardening of the heart is kind of a trick question because
I'm not trying to trick.
It really kind of is because it says God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but I think it's more, if you go into the interlinear and you go into the, the Strong's dictionary and you see what hardened means, it means strengthened. He strengthened Pharaoh's heart by demonstrating his divine power to the Israelites because he already knew that Pharaoh was already set in his ways. He already knew. And he's demonstrating his power by showing the Israelites through the 10 plagues that is why he hardened his heart. I mean, it's kind of it is really a trick. It doesn't, like Jeremy said, it doesn't necessarily mean it's how you interpret it.
The biggest problem,
So let me ask you a couple other questions here to kind of help you think about this a little bit outside the box. Was Pharaoh's heart hard? It never changed. Or did Pharaoh's heart harden with time? Okay, I would agree with that. I believe that Pharaoh's heart changed over the course of the 10 plagues, and and over the course of the 10 plagues, his heart hardened. Okay, let me ask you this question then. What was God's greatest desire to have come out of the plagues? Now, when I say greatest, I am implying that there are multiple different levels of outcome of the plagues. What was God's greatest, highest objective to have happen as a result of the plagues? One, he was going to free Israel from bondage. Is that all?
reveal himself.
Reveal himself, I'll give you a point. Is that all?
To show that they were worshiping false gods.
I'll give you a point. Is that all?
I didn't hear what she said.
To reveal to Israel and to the Egyptians, is that what? Okay. Is that all?
The whole idea of the whole of this great controversy is that you will turn to him. So his desire was that all would, of course, turn to him.
Does that include
Yes.
Pharaoh? Yes. Okay. So, think about this. When God introduces himself to the world and he engages here in Egypt on behalf of Israel, the purpose of the plagues is not to harden Pharaoh's heart, but rather it is to what? Soften his heart. In other words, God wants Pharaoh to come to an aha moment. I completely missed that point about the God in heaven. I didn't realize I was being blinded astray, led astray by the demons, so to speak, who created all these 1,500 gods. I'm going to change course and I'm going to become a follower of God. That was the number one primo objective that God had in engaging with Pharaoh in relationship to the plagues.
Period.
Period.
Engaging with Pharaoh, period, not just.
Oh, yes, right. But so when God begins to engage Pharaoh, and we can go through some of this, but we incrementally move through a sequence that starts, if you might say, at a very basic level. I don't know if that's the right word, and grows, you might say, in overturning Pharaoh's worldview, so to speak. Yes, George.
How would you expect Pharaoh to change his mind if the Egyptians could duplicate the first two plagues? That doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
Well, when you consider that Moses' snake ate the others, that's a bit challenging.
Yes, Nita.
I like what our lesson studies.
Yes.
God did not create fresh evil in Pharaoh's heart. Instead, he simply gave Pharaoh over to his own malign impulses.
Okay. Okay. Yes. So, okay. Now that's the, you might say, the next chapter, the next phase in this whole thing. God's objective is for Pharaoh to respond in a positive way. But Pharaoh resists. Pharaoh hardens his heart. In other words, makes up his mind. And when I say that, what in a sense Pharaoh is saying here is he says, you know what? You can give me any evidence you want, and I am not going to acknowledge it. And what happens? It's interesting, the first, I forget, the lesson said something about the first 9 times in Exodus where it talks about Pharaoh's heart being hardened. It's Pharaoh who is hardening his heart. Then it's God hardening his heart. So what happens? If you, and I've given you this little handout here, which is one of the beauties of the internet, because people have put together some amazing things that kind of help you see in one page, you know, what's going on here. But you can see here that we have the plagues. And each plague, if you will, knocks the legs out from underneath one god at a time. And so, you know, we start out with you know, the river, the Nile River. Well, pretty basic. And, you know, the Nile River turns to blood and, you know, dead fish and all this sort of thing. Well, again, each plague takes the wind, so to speak, out of Pharaoh's sail in relationship to his worldview, what he believes is God, or who God is, or how God operates. And it just continually keeps chipping down the road. Yes?
The one thing is, too, though, like was brought out in the lesson, that if his magicians had been true or real, their enchantments would have reversed it, not duplicated it. And all they could do was duplicate it.
Right.
Reverse it.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, going back a little bit, as far as the Jews were concerned, they were artisans at that time. They were the ones building the cities.
Yeah.
He didn't want his, because they are smart people. They are capable of many things, and at that time, they needed them and wanted them, and he didn't want to let them go.
Sure. You know, I don't know when. So obviously, you know, Pharaoh's interests in the Israelites were, you know, there's an economic component to that equation. I don't know how much that was driving the decision initially, but I believe that very, very quickly in this whole exchange, Pharaoh understood that what was taking place was his, and I put this in quotes, divinity, his divineness as a god was being challenged by this God of Israel, who was making this unreasonable request that we go out in the desert and worship for 3 days or whatever else. George.
Yeah, can you imagine if things happened in Albany and not in Corvallis? I mean, it should dawn on you quickly.
Yeah. So what you're referencing here is that initially the plagues involved all of Egypt, and it affected the Israelites and it affected the Egyptians. But then by the time you get to the fourth plague, which is the flies, people become aware of the fact that the flies seem to stop at a point in space and not involve the Israelites, but involve the area of Egypt. I mean, and so what is happening here?
The people are seeing it, but Pharaoh is still stupid enough to hang on.
I mean, this is good. I mean, you're looking at 9 gods here that the Egyptians basically worship.
Yeah.
God, our God is sitting there attacking each one of these gods separately and letting them go.
Yeah.
I'm the man.
Like I'm saying, the legs are getting knocked out from under each one of these one at a time. And as we go down through these plagues, and as you look at this list, you can see the stakes are getting higher and higher. The connection is becoming more and more obvious. You can't miss what's happening here. Even his counselors get to the point where they are not only being affected by the plagues, but they can't even come into the court because they're so incapacitated by the whole thing.
And God knows that Pharaoh's heart's already hardened, because it says here in Exodus 7:13-15, he tells Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He will not let the people go.
Yeah.
He already knows.
Yeah. Well, yeah. God obviously knew the outcome. But again, I want you to not forget the point, and that is this. God's real objective was for Pharaoh to respond and to become a partner with him, not an antagonist against him.
Just as a sidebar, you mentioned the 3 days thing. And I said to people last week, God never told Moses to say, we're going to go out for 3 days. All of a sudden, I'm like, where did Moses come up with the 3 days thing? It was just like an appeasement. We're just going to go out for 3 days. But God never said that. God never said it to Moses. God never said it anywhere. I thought, well, that's an interest. I hadn't thought about it until this lesson. Why did he say it? And I figured it was more of an appeasement. Just let us go. We ain't coming back, but let us go for 3 days. So I thought it was kind of interesting that Moses put that out. God never said that. Never said 3 days, never said anything.
He did. I think God told Moses to say that.
He did.
Yeah, let's find it.
Yeah, find it for me then. I must have missed it.
Okay. Something that I came across that I thought was interesting, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are on it. In relationship to Pharaoh, this has been called by some people the law of truth. The law of truth. You cannot avoid the truth. You can only delay the day you deal with it.
There you go.
Think about that. Did Pharaoh eventually have to acknowledge that God was supreme.
Ultimately, every
He
tongue
did,
shall
but
confess and every knee shall bow.
his declaration was not really.
Exodus 3.
It was, you might say, forced from him. Right, exactly. But he had to acknowledge. The evidence was overwhelming.
Okay, now bringing it to our day about the worship and so on. Now, I'm not crazy about golf, okay?
You are or not?
But I don't worship.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
No, I agree.
Because I don't sacrifice my son because I didn't love the So there is a totally different situation when we talk about worship. They actually worship their gods in a special way.
Oh, sure, yeah. In a way that, again, we don't know a whole lot about it, but
I don't worship my car, but I love it.
yeah, okay. Yeah. Yes?
Have we moved past the hardening of the hearts? Because you addressed have you moved past that already?
We're having a conversation, so I mean, add whatever you want. I'm not.
There are the verses that refer to Moses hardening his heart. There's the verses that refer to God hardening Moses' heart. And we've addressed the Moses hardening his heart, but we haven't really talked about God hardening his heart. And I think that's...
Okay, let's dial back then to that. So what are your thoughts? What would you like to say in relationship to God hardening Pharaoh's heart? What does that mean?
I'm sorry, I got a little distraction here.
Okay, so what does it mean when it says God hardened his heart?
Oh, yeah, let's discuss that. Well, I think that as the lesson brings out an illustration that when I was a child, I mean, this illustration's been around a long time, and that is what helped me to first start to comprehend what was meant. And if you haven't read the lesson, it's the illustration of wax in the sun, wax and...
So this is on the bottom of page 32. You want me to read that part?
Sure.
Okay. As an analogy, imagine sunshine that beats on butter and clay. Butter melts versus clay hardens. The heat of the sun is the same in both cases, but they are two different reactions to the heat and two different results. The effect on the material, the effect depends on the material. In the case of Pharaoh, one may say that it depended on the attitude of his heart towards God and his people. So what was Pharaoh's attitude towards God and God's people going in? He was already hardened. He was already predisposed to be against, to resist. Now,
Our biggest problem is when you're dealing with other people who do
yeah,
not
it's usually other people who have problems with hardening heart.
look at God as being a loving, caring, and out for your good. Because they'll throw this particular sentences back in my face and say, you know, this guy didn't stand a chance. God hardened his heart, you know, this type of thing. That's the problem with taking a verse here and just hanging yourself on it. But it is there, and she's right.
Well, let me ask you a question. Did God actually do things that hardened Pharaoh's heart?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a correct statement.
Let's look at what you
But
have.
you started with the statement he was already hard.
And what did we talk about earlier? We said that over time, it did what? It hardened. It became more hard.
Yes.
You asked the question, did he do things that hardened Pharaoh's heart? And the answer is yes, but then you concluded heart. There's a difference. He did some things that resulted in Pharaoh hardening his heart, but that's different than hardening Pharaoh's heart. So when I spank my child, I have done something, but I didn't harden my child's heart, even though sometimes when I spank the child, they were not happy with mom. I didn't harden the child's heart. I did something, and the child responded to it. And in the same way, God did things. He did the plagues. He didn't harden the heart. Pharaoh responded to what God did. He made an active choice, and he hardened his own heart. Even though the Bible at times says that God hardened his heart, God didn't reach in and harden anything. He treated Pharaoh similar to he treated Saul. On the road to Damascus, Saul had a real wake-up call. And it didn't harden his heart. All along, the Holy Spirit had been working with Saul. And Saul had been rejecting, but he finally went, whoa, okay, God. And he turned. Go ahead, Tom.
Like, how many plagues was there?
10.
And how many times in the Bible in Exodus does it say that God hardened Pharaoh's heart? 10 times.
Yeah, 9 or 10 both directions.
9 and 9, there's 18 altogether. Well,
9 and
9
9.
for him and 9 for God.
But, you know, we're taught that I am in charge of my own reactions. You know, it's not anyone else's fault. If I get angry, it doesn't matter what someone has done to me. It is not their responsibility how I respond to it. It's not your fault if you upset me. It's my fault if I choose to respond to you in that way. And so while the terminology is that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, it was Pharaoh's decision every time. He is responsible for his own decisions. And
The question
we
is-
use the term hardened at times. I mean, still is somebody. Boy, he sure made him mad. Well, no, he didn't make him mad. The second there, she made him mad. No, he chose to respond that way. And that's, I think, what's going on here. Just like the sunshine illustration on the clay and the butter. If Pharaoh's heart had been butter, it would have melted. But it wasn't. It was clay, and so it hardened with everything that happened. He made a choice to harden. God doesn't reach in. God is not evil. He is not going to cause someone to go against him. I shouldn't say cause. He's not going to make him. The circumstance may result in hardening, but God would never. That's a definition of God is love. He's not going to make someone. Okay, I took my time.
You've said it 3 times, I think. Yes, Ron.
There's a question that came up about the 3 days journey.
Yes.
It's not there in Exodus 5,
Exodus 5,
verse 3.
verse 3.
They, which is Moses to Aaron, said, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go 3 days journey into the desert to sacrifice to the Lord our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or the sword. And then the king of Egypt said to them, Moses, Aaron, why do you take the people from their work and get back to you later.
Okay.
See, it's not God speaking, it's Moses that's
Hang on,
speaking to Pharaoh.
If you go to Exodus 3:18,
Oh,
it's
another one,
Moses
okay.
speaking. I mean, God telling Moses and Aaron what to do.
All right, we got that detail sorted out. Yes.
That much. What I was trying to say before is just that the whole aspect between Moses and Pharaoh is that the devil didn't want Israel. He didn't want the promises of God to be met.
Sure.
And he's standing behind Pharaoh the whole way because he is the representative. Whereas, of course, Moses is the representative of Christ, who's going to be their redeemer, who the Spirit and Jesus and so on are standing behind Moses. This is the great controversy that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no question. But again, God's objective, or excuse me, Satan not only wanted to keep Israel in slavery, he also wanted to keep Pharaoh and the Egyptians in slavery also. So it was a broad campaign for the purpose of keeping all of them in slavery to sin. Let's see.
Someone else may disagree with me and have another thought on that. Sorry to have pontificated.
What are you saying?
On the issue of hardening God, hardening Pharaoh's heart, I pontificated too long.
Oh.
I apologize, but someone else may have something to say on it. Someone else may disagree.
So any other thoughts? All right. Let me ask you a question. And I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole here on this one here, but is there another place in the Bible where we have plagues that are mentioned? And are they different than these plagues?
Well, there's Revelation.
Revelation. That's exactly right. We have Revelation. Is there a difference between the plagues that we see in Egypt versus the plagues that we see taking place in Revelation?
The final outcome is the same.
The outcome is the same?
And the final outcome.
So the plagues in Egypt were for the purpose of what? Of what? Salvation, right, exactly. God was trying to save not only his people, which he was going to do anyway, but he was actually trying to save the Egyptians also. Whereas the plagues in Revelation are plagues that occur as a result of rebellion and rejection of God. And oh yeah, I'm sorry.
It seems to me that in both cases, the objective is separation.
Separation.
It's a separation.
Differentiation. Okay.
So in the Egypt plagues, the result is there's a separation of God's people from the world.
Right.
And at the end, in Revelation, there's a separation of God's people from the world.
From the world, yes. Okay, I like that. All right. Anything else we want to talk about?
The other thing, too, is to consider that the devil is the one, when the 7 last plagues strike, the one who, God's people are sealed and saved
Yes.
by that time. So the one who is wreaking havoc is Satan.
Right. In other words, God's power has been removed that provides protection, and then that is allowed to get. Whereas in the Egypt side, God's power is being used in a proactive way to actually try to bring knowledge about what really is true and what really isn't. You know, one of the interesting things also in this story about the plagues is that we have Pharaoh, who seems to be being more firmly grounded in his decision. But what's happening with his advisors? In other words, they had their eyes open. They could see what was happening. Okay? And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to add, I wonder if, at the beginning, if the counselors hardened their hearts. But eventually, they reached the point where the conviction, they made a flip on it.
Well, I guess I think the way I would frame it is I would say that they all had hard hearts to varying degrees. They all observed the evidence that was presented, and they all responded accordingly. And apparently, at some point in time, whether they actually were making a change in their position because of a conviction, or simply the evidence was so overwhelming that they just had to acknowledge that they were losing this fight. And you're better off to retreat than to keep fighting. But Pharaoh what? Did not listen. Can you think of any other story in the Bible where this is reenacted again? Oh, Judas. How does that story fit?
Well, he had the chance to change.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I was thinking of the story of Haman. You know, Haman is a leper. He needs healing. He's told to go wash in the Jordan River, and he doesn't like the directive, and he's ready to head home and forget about this whole thing. And what happens? His bodyguard or whatever says, "Come on, maybe you can just try this and see if it works." And guess what? He healed. So I think, you know, listening to counselors, I think, is something to take seriously. I mean, if the people who you've looked to for direction are advising you to change course, maybe there's a value in that. Safety in a multitude of counselors. Okay. So in closing, if you want to look at page 36 of the lesson, it says God's people were permitted to experience the grinding cruelty of the Egyptians, that they might not be deceived concerning the debasing influences of idolatry. In his dealing with Pharaoh, God manifested his hatred of idolatry and his determination to punish cruelty and oppression. There was no exercise of supernatural power to harden the heart of the king. God gave to Pharaoh the most striking evidence of divine power, but the monarch stubbornly refused to heed the light, the information, the knowledge. Every display of infinite power rejected by him rendered him the more determined in his rebellion. The seeds of rebellion that he sowed when he rejected the first miracle produced their ultimate harvest at the end. So what's the lesson for us? I mean, this took place 3,000 years ago. What does this have to do with us? Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm looking at
Psalm
Psalm 51,
51,
10.
10.
Give me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me.
Okay. And what do you think steadfast spirit means?
So we have to agree we need the surgery. We have to get rid of that old one.
Yeah,
And get the new one,
yeah.
and then we'll have that steadfast heartbeat.
Right. In other words, we'll be consistently in tune and in alignment with God. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we all have to recognize that God is revealing himself to each one of us in many different ways, and the decisions that we make relative to what God has revealed either moves us towards hard clay or soft butter. And of course, God wants us to have a responsive heart, a heart that not only hears what he reveals, but also responds to what he has revealed. And I think the story of Pharaoh, the 10 plagues in Egypt and Israel, help us understand what happens in this head of ours when we go down certain direction. If we go to the left, things get hard. If things go to the right, things get soft. Ultimately, the story of Egypt and the plagues, I believe, give us a picture as to the kind of person God really is. And God is not in the business of deciding somebody's going to be lost or somebody's going to be saved. His goal is that everybody is saved. And he gives everybody evidence, and he gives them the opportunity to make choices. And at the end of the day, God honors that choice. That's what Paul's talking about in the first part of Romans, that God's wrath is when he finally says, okay, I've done everything I can to reveal who I am and the kind of person I am and what I want to do for you. And if you don't want it, I'm not going to force it on you. And the neat thing is that this is the very first message that God reveals to the world when he steps onto the stage in Egypt and begins his engagement with Israel going forward. That is the message. And that message has been consistently repeated throughout time ever since. And you and I have the opportunity of sharing that with the world around us.